Have you ever imagined losing everything you've built overnight and still finding the strength to start over, alone? This is the story of a brave mother who watched her home turn to dust after a devastating tornado. With no husband, no money, and 2 teenagers to raise, she grabbed a hammer, faced the impossible, and began, with her own hands, to rebuild what the wind had taken. But what she didn't know was that her quiet act of courage would awaken something much greater and transform not only her life, but an entire town. This story will move you from beginning to end. In the small town of Elmswood, nestled in rural Kansas, storms were part of the calendar just like Christmas or Thanksgiving. It was as if nature wanted to remind the residents, year after year, that despite the peace and routine of the place, it still had the power to turn everything upside down in a matter of minutes. And that's exactly what happened on a morning in May, when the sky darkened in an eerie way. The wind began to howl with a bone-chilling intensity, and a heavy silence settled before the roar of destruction took over. Sarah Thompson, a brave mother of 42, was in the kitchen when the alert started buzzing on her phone. She had woken up early to make breakfast for her children, Ellie, 17, and Noah, 15, just like she did every day. She was a simple woman, soft-spoken, with hands calloused from hard work. Since her husband had passed away 3 years earlier in a truck accident on an icy highway, she had become the lone pillar of that household. There was no choice. She had to keep everything standing. For her children, for her husband's memory, and maybe just to keep from falling apart herself. The coffee wasn't even done brewing when she heard the sound, like a train screaming through the skies. Her heart raced. "Please, not now," she murmured. The fear wasn't for her. It never was. It was for her children. Always was. Always would be. She ran to the bedrooms, shouting for them. "Get to the basement, now!" The house trembled, as if it was about to lift off the ground. The windows shattered before Noah even finished running down the stairs. Sarah grabbed both kids, hugging them as if her arms could be shields. And in the damp darkness of that basement, the world collapsed outside. It only took minutes. The tornado sliced through Elmswood like a blade, tearing off roofs, ripping century-old trees from their roots, and turning entire houses into heaps of wood and bricks. When the noise finally stopped, an eerie silence fell. Sarah took a deep breath. She slowly climbed the stairs, her children following close, and when she pushed open what was left of the door, her heart sank. Her house was gone. What remained was a confused pile of wood, broken furniture, scattered photos in the mud, and walls torn like paper. It looked as if the house had exploded from the inside out, the home she had built with so much effort, where every corner held a memory, where every nail had been driven with love, simply no longer existed. Neighbors emerged from their own hiding spots, all dazed. The town, small as it was, had been nearly leveled. It looked like a war had passed through. But in that moment, Sarah didn't cry. She looked at her children, both in shock, trying to grasp what they had just lost, and then pulled them close. "We're alive," she said, her voice steady despite the dirt and dried tears on her face. And that's what matters now. That night, they slept in the school's community shelter, along with dozens of other families. Makeshift mattresses, the smell of mildew, and fear lingering in the air. And it was there, among the sighs and sobs of her neighbors, that Sarah made a silent promise. She wouldn't let the tornado erase her family's story. She wouldn't accept that this was the end. The next day, while many waited for government aid, donations, or some kind of miracle, Sarah decided she would do what she had always done, get back up on her own, like she did when she lost her husband, like she'd been doing ever since. With the help of a borrowed shovel, she began clearing the wreckage of what was once the Thompson home, one piece at a time, one brick at a time. Ellie tried to convince her to wait for help. Noah kept asking how they would rebuild everything with no money. But Sarah, with her hair tied in a messy bun and her hands covered in scratches, always answered with the same look, determined, unbreakable. The community around her was devastated. Some considered moving away. Others were paralyzed by trauma. But Sarah, with her almost stubborn courage, became a beacon of light in the darkness. Every day she returned to that destroyed plot with whatever tools she could borrow. A hammer, a saw, recycled wood. She learned on YouTube how to raise walls, lay foundations, install a roof. There was no formal training, only willpower. And her children. Oh, her children began to see her differently. Ellie, still shaken, started writing down measurements and carrying boards with her mother. Noah, swallowing his anger, began hammering nails and digging by her side. It became more than a physical reconstruction. It became a reunion of souls, a collective new beginning. And even when her hands trembled from exhaustion, when the rains tried to halt her progress, Sarah never stopped. What she carried in her heart was bigger than any storm. It was love. It was the pain of having lost so much, but the faith that there was still so much left to build. And as days turned into weeks, something began to shift among the neighbors as well. Watching that woman, day after day, under the sun and dust, fighting alone to rebuild her home, awakened something in each of them. Her courage was contagious, and though no one said it out loud, everyone knew. Sarah wasn't just rebuilding her house, she was rebuilding Elmswood. But little did they know, the greatest challenge was yet to come. At first, rebuilding felt like a kind of catharsis for Sarah, something almost symbolic, as if, by raising wall after wall, she was also piecing together the shards of her own soul. But soon enough, reality hit hard. Rebuilding wasn't just about hammering and lifting wood. It was dealing with bureaucracy, lack of resources, extreme physical exhaustion, and the most difficult of all, the constant fear that, in the end, it might all be for nothing. In the early days, Sarah managed to borrow some tools from a neighbor whose shed had partially survived. The boards she salvaged from the wreckage, reused everything. Broken doors, destroyed cabinets, furniture that could be dismantled and used as structure. There was a kind of desperate creativity there, but also a deep dignity in every choice she made. But when it came time to lay real foundations, she realized improvising wouldn't cut it. She needed concrete, cement, rebar, and that cost money. Money she simply didn't have. Her part-time job at the local grocery store, which used to supplement the small pensions she received from her husband's death, had ended when the store was destroyed. The supermarket was now rubble. Her income was practically zero. That's when Sarah made a bold decision. She started cleaning the few houses that were still standing, cooking for families who, like her, were trying to get back on their feet. And on weekends, she washed clothes by hand for those who no longer had access to laundry facilities. All of this during the day, while at night, she continued the reconstruction process, working under improvised floodlights powered by a car battery. Her children worried. Ellie, especially, noticed her mother's deepening dark circles, the small cuts on her hands, the knee pain she tried to hide. Noah, frustrated that he couldn't do more, began looking for work too. He handed out flyers, washed cars, even cut grass with a dull pair of scissors in the early days. It wasn't about pride. It was about survival, about rebuilding what was theirs. That home, small as it was everything they had. Still, the pace was slow, very slow. Every step took a Herculean effort. Amid the dust of the plot, the suffocating summer heat, and the uncertainty of each day, the brave mother kept going, head held high, even when her body begged to stop. But the challenges didn't only come from the outside. One of the toughest moments came on a stifling afternoon when Sarah came home, or what was left of it, and found Ellie sitting on a crate, crying. The daughter, always the more reserved one, couldn't hold it in any longer. "Mom, are we going to spend our whole lives trying to rebuild this?" she said, through sobs. "Don't you ever think about leaving? Starting over somewhere else? Why stay here, where everything was destroyed?" Sarah sat beside her, eyes wet too, but showing no weakness, because this piece of land is where your dad saw you take your first steps. It's where you proudly showed me your first report card, where Noah fell off his bike and cried like the world was ending. This place is our story, and stories aren't abandoned, sweetheart. They're honored. Ellie didn't say another word that day, but she never questioned it again. As the weeks went on, other residents started returning to what was left of their homes. Many were astonished by how much Sarah had built on her own. The basic structure of the house was already visible. The walls were taking shape. Some windows had been installed using salvaged frames from abandoned properties. There was no electricity or running water yet, but the essence of a home was already there. One day, while going to the neighboring town's construction warehouse to collect donated materials, Sarah was told that someone had reported her for rebuilding without city permits. Bureaucracy had arrived. Irregular construction, the papers said. Threat of embargo, fines, documentation that cost more than she owned. It felt like a punch to the gut. She returned home with red eyes, but steady steps. And that night, after the kids fell asleep, she wrote a letter to City Hall, not filled with anger, but with truth. She wrote about her husband's death, about the daily struggle, about the love she poured into every swing of the hammer. She said she wasn't building an illegal house. She was simply trying to rebuild her life. The letter went viral days later, after a public employee was so moved that he posted it on social media. And suddenly, Sarah's name was being whispered by people she'd never met. The first bits of help started arriving. Bags of cement discreetly left on her doorstep. A retired mason who showed up offering a few hours of help each week. Just because? A volunteer electrician. An elderly couple who donated a stove. It wasn't much, but for Sarah, it felt like the whole world. But even with that small support, a shadow loomed. One night, while reviewing the donated materials, she realized many were defective. Warped boards, expired cement, broken tools, and she had to redo much of the work she'd already completed. The frustration hit her differently this time. She sat on the packed dirt floor, face in her hands, and allowed herself to cry. Truly cry. "I just want to give them a home," she whispered, as if speaking to the wind. But, as always, she got up the next morning, and it was on one of those ordinary days, amid nails, back pain, and sweat dripping down her face, that a man stepped out of a black pickup truck, dressed simply, eyes filled with curiosity. He observed the structure for a few minutes before approaching. "Are you Sarah Thompson?" he asked. She looked at him cautiously, wiping her hands on her dirty jeans. "That's me. Why? I've been hearing stories about you, and I needed to see for myself if they were true." She frowned, confused. The man extended his hand, a slight smile on his face. "My name is Richard Evans." She had no idea who he was, but that encounter would change everything. Sarah stared at the man standing in front of her, worn cap on his head, eyes that carried untold stories. She didn't know it yet, but this moment would become the turning point she never could have imagined. Richard Evans wasn't from around there anymore. He had been born in Elmswood but left while still young, built a career in real estate in Chicago, and amassed a fortune. His name quietly appeared among the region's major investors, though no one in town really knew that. He had returned to his hometown after the tornado, driven more by nostalgia and curiosity than anything else, and what he found moved him deeply. While everyone was talking about destruction, One story kept coming up again and again. The story of a brave mother who, with no money, no help, and no infrastructure, was rebuilding her home with her own hands. Richard, a skeptic by nature, had to see it for himself, and there she was. Hair pulled back, sweaty face, calloused hands, but with a sparkle in her eyes he hadn't seen in a long time. The house was already standing, even if unfinished. Hanging windows, unpainted walls, raw floors. But there was life there. Soul, determination. "You did all this by yourself?" he asked, taking in every detail. Sarah crossed her arms, still wary. "Me and my kids. With a hammer, YouTube videos, and a whole lot of faith," Richard chuckled, but not in mockery. It was admiration. "Can I see inside?" She hesitated, but eventually nodded. Inside, the house was even more impressive. There was an improvised bedroom with donated mattresses, a small stove, and an old refrigerator powered by a borrowed generator. Family photos had been carefully cleaned and pinned back on the walls, as if past and present had been stitched together again. Richard walked slowly, taking it all in. When he reached the kitchen, he noticed the chipped dishes, the cabinet rebuilt with salvaged wood, and a handwritten phrase on the wall: "Where there is love, there is home." He turned to her with a lump in his throat. "Sarah, you have no idea what this represents, what you represent." She smiled with a mix of fatigue and quiet strength. "I'm not doing this to impress anyone. I'm just trying to give my kids a home. And that's exactly why it's so impressive," he replied, genuinely. The next day, Richard came back, and the next, but he didn't come empty-handed. He began bringing high-quality construction materials, brand new tools, even 2 professional builders who, according to him, owed him a favor. Sarah, proud as ever, tried to refuse. "I'm not asking for charity," she said, looking him straight in the eye. "And I'm not offering charity," he replied. "I'm offering recognition, real help. You deserve more than a makeshift roof. You deserve to live with dignity." Her resistance slowly began to fade, especially because her kids were exhausted. And when she saw Ellie smile as she received a new bed with a comfy mattress, and Noah jumping with joy at the ceiling fan finally installed in his room, Sarah understood. Accepting help wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. The following weeks felt like a dream. The house gained siding, plumbing, heating, a new floor, and even a wooden porch with a rocking chair. Richard's idea, inspired by his grandmother's old house in the same town. Then, one Sunday morning, as the sun bathed the new rooftops in gold, Richard showed up with a filming crew. "What's this?" Sarah asked, already worried. "Relax. Just a small documentary. I want to tell your story. Show people there's still folks like you in the world. People who don't give up, who turn the impossible into possible." Sarah took a deep breath. That wasn't exactly what she wanted, but it wasn't just about her anymore. If her story could inspire someone, maybe it was worth it. The video went viral. Millions of views, comments from across the country. People moved, touched, inspired. Some donated money. Others sent letters, gifts, tools. But the most astonishing thing was still to come. Moved by the response and the impact of the story, Richard made an announcement during a local press conference. "The courage of a mother reminded me of what truly matters. That's why, with my resources, I won't just finish Sarah's house. We're going to restore the entire Elmswood neighborhood. Every family affected by the tornado will receive support to rebuild their homes. No one gets left behind." The news hit like a bomb, the good kind, that spreads hope. "And Sarah?" She cried. For the first time since the tornado, she cried without pain. It was gratitude, relief, the weight of the world lifting from her shoulders. The Thompson house was completed in September. A full home, beautiful, with a garden out front, a porch with hanging lights, and a small wooden sign on the door. A brave mother lives here. The Elmswood community began to transform. Forgotten homes were restored. Children started playing in the streets again. Businesses reopened. The town, once broken, began to breathe again. Sarah didn't become a celebrity, nor did she want to. She kept living simply, working, raising her kids, staying grounded. But wherever she went, she was recognized and respected. Ellie went on to study architecture. She wanted to learn how to build, like her mom. Noah started helping with community projects. He wanted to give back the good they received. And Richard, well, he began visiting the town frequently. And every now and then, he could be seen sitting on Sarah's porch, talking about life, the past, and dreams for the future. The tornado destroyed so much in Elmswood, but it also revealed a strength the world needed to see. The strength of a mother who didn't wait for miracles, who didn't fold her arms, who didn't give in to despair. A brave mother who, with courage, faith, and love, rebuilt more than a house. She rebuilt a home. She rebuilt a town. She rebuilt what the wind tried to take and left something even stronger in its place. Hope. If this story touched your heart like it touched ours, don't leave without giving it a like. That really helps. The channel keep bringing you real stories that inspire and warm the soul. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming stories of brave mothers like Sarah, who teach us about love, courage, and resilience every single day. And if you know someone who could use a dose of hope, share this video. Sometimes, all we need is to know that there's still strength left in the world.